Hey everybody, welcome to the Trans Files. And tonight we are going to be talking about the lesbian community. Yay! So we actually decided to go ahead and bring on our newest member of T.R.A.N, Millennium Jess, as most of you know on TikTok. And she's going to definitely give us some insight about the lesbian community, give us kind of like a backstory of the lesbian community, and basically, as the title suggests, what the hell is going on with the lesbian community? What's the state of it, and how can we fix it? That is the most important thing, because right now, the lesbian community is getting a bad rep, and honestly, we need to fix it. So
some of them deserve the bad rep.
Yep. Mainly the ones that actually chose to go to the TERF movement. That's the ones that we're referring to. So if you want to go ahead and just take it away, Jess, and just share your insights on what you know.
First of all, I'm just finding out I'm a lesbian today. So, well, we were talking beforehand, and you had asked about sort of lesbian history, and my first thought was, again, I have the tism. So my brain went, oh my God, how far back are we going? And, go all the way back to ancient Greece and even into the Sappho writings and why we're called Sapphic. And again, knowing that there was not a lot written about lesbians, like ever. It's really hard to find actual lesbian writing. And when you do, it's usually by men, not by lesbians. Whether it's because we stayed very quiet, who knows? I think a lot of lesbian works were probably destroyed often when they were found. So a lot of Sappho's writings were actually about bisexual love, not lesbian love. And most of them, again, were highly erotic. And not that I'm opposed to highly erotic writing. I love it. But it wasn't really discussing us as people and love, whereas a lot of gay writing was about love and connection. Lesbian writing was really about that high eroticism. So there's not a lot to be found actually throughout history until we start getting into more activism roles. It is plausible that they went under pseudonyms, but it's impossible to find them. The works that they have found going all the way back were specifically by historians decided to be written by a male perspective. So it would be nice to find more or even under pseudonyms, but so far, not so much. So then, we kind of get into, even in the 1600s where they were trying to bring in laws against homosexuality. And like I was saying earlier, it never really stuck for lesbians. And a lot of people do not realize that it's because nobody wanted lesbianism announced. And this was all Puritan culture. So John Cotton being one of the first, I think the first, to try and bring out these laws and getting into sort of that whole Plymouth kind of, era, where it was really about persecution, but they were more about persecuting males and really just brushing things under the rug about women, admonishing them, trying to keep them separate. And then we got into sort of the bigger groups during the war, after the war, and then into the 70s where we got a little bit more traction. But we often get sidelined because the lesbian community tends to always be the community that helps or amplifies a different issue, or we have until current. Again, I was talking about a group of lesbians that were trying to bring back pride marches and getting out of the prides that were celebratory and bringing on, these big banks and churches paying to be in the pride, to go back to what we were doing. And a lot of those pride marches were bringing highlights to the issues in all of the letters of our community. That's how you found stuff out, was who was carrying a banner and what that was about and talking to people. So But then COVID hit, so they only got one crack at that can, and then they came back out for Black Lives Matter, and they became huge activists for BIPOC trans community. So, which is important. I'm glad that we still do those sorts of things, right? So I don't know how far back to go into history and what that looks like. And, the history of lesbianism changes from culture to culture, country to country. And a lot of what is written on lesbians is American history, not really British history or what that looked like. And even the classism differences between Europe and America. Mm-hmm. Because for the longest time, homosexuality was revered.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't until Puritans and huge, basically the American Christo-fascists wanted this all stopped. So if we go back into Greece, Roman times, it was all completely normal. And then they wanted that stopped.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if any of us, we all have our theories of why in religion they wanted to make this about homosexuality. A lot of my theories are a lot of the men that were running the Christo-fascists were homosexual. And this was a lot of internalized homosexuality, although that wasn't a word or a term at the time, really hating themselves and trying to keep it contained. And then if we move past where it became about persecuting lesbians, we just got lumped in with witches. So if we want to look at the persecution of lesbians, it wasn't actually about lesbians. Again, there's only been one lesbian couple, 2 lesbians that were admonished or persecuted under law against homosexuality in the United States. But if you look at all of the witches that were burned at the stake or stoned or drowned, they were the ones that were very open and natural and would have had many women around them or covens, and they were put to death. And a lot of them would have been lesbians today.
Mm-hmm. I actually agree with this comment. Homosexuality is painted all throughout history and swept that detail under the rug. So, like the example, them painted as white Jesus.
Yeah, absolutely. It's everywhere. When did the hatred start? When did it switch from being, okay or accepted into, again, this Puritan sort of Christo-fascist mindset? The history on that would be with John Coffey.
Mm-hmm.
And his need to create laws against homosexuality, which was mostly persecuting gay men, but then having it in the books about lewd behavior for lesbian acts. Mm-hmm. So again, that couple that was the only ones persecuted, that was in 1649. So it was Sarah White Norman and Mary Vincent Hammond. And they were charged with lewd acts upon a bed. Mm-hmm. One was admonished and one basically had to wear a scarlet letter, mm-hmm. which, comparative to what was happening to men who were homosexual in the persecution, it was incredibly different. They didn't want anyone to know that this could be done. So the fear is that if your wife was around somebody who was doing this, or they were doing what they used to call bitch and stitch back in the time where everyone would get together, then they would leave you and they would all become lesbians and we were all witches. So they didn't want to announce it. So mm-hmm. they kept it very quiet. They did try with other, couples that they found. It just disappeared, right? Mm-hmm. So our persecutions didn't really start until the suffragette movement and bringing that from the UK. And if you look at the propaganda around suffragettes, it has a very lesbian connotation to it. Mm-hmm. Suffragettes, they don't like men and they're only having sex with each other. And it was very much, if you let your wife be a suffragette or want the vote, basically she will be a lesbian. Even though that wasn't the terminology used, it was alluded to.
Mm-hmm. And actually, you mentioned about American history. So, I did a little research myself. So I'm going to go ahead and put this on my screen, actually. So, if most of you remember, this was the first lesbian civil rights movement here in America. It was called the Daughters of Politis. It was formed in San Francisco in 1955. And so essentially how it started, it was started off as a secret society. There wasn't like very many members. There was about like 8 members, I believe, here in America. And basically they had chapters all across the country. They had some in Australia as well. But essentially later on, they actually changed their shift and realized, okay, well, there's a big stigma with homosexuality. This group was not safe at all when it comes to like law enforcement. They were raided by local police, the CIA, the FBI, and they also are the ones that are responsible that published the ladder in 1965. So I want people to remember that too. I mean, the lesbian community has actually been very, very an inclusive community. And what's going on with the lesbian community right now, it's really fucking depressing to me. Because we're supposed to be a fucking community where we're all in solidarity with one another. Now we got there's some lesbians that have basically decided to join the TERF movement. And now they're all anti-trans. And right now that is the problem. That is something we need to fix. I have always said the TERF movement, I think, is the reason why we're so divided.
Agreed. And I think it's
the fucking stop.
It's the most dangerous of what's going on currently.
And Tsukuru, I actually wanted you to kind of discuss this because there was an article here in America that was by the New York Times. It was a very divisive article. It was like, what was it called? The one thing that the left, the far left, and the far right agree on is that women don't count. It was completely filled with TERF rhetoric. You want to go ahead and talk about that a little bit, Tsukuru?
Yeah, I mean, as much as I can remember, I guess. I mean, it's one slight distinction, though. It's not even an article; it's an opinion piece. So that's kind of, I mean, to me, it's important because it's really not talking about, current events or anything. Or, I mean, even though it was triggered by Roe v. Wade, obviously. But this author, I mean, journalist, I guess, yeah, I mean, it was essentially like a collection of turf talking points, by definition. But I guess, so, I mean, we don't really have to go into that because we all know that, right? I mean, it's about, again, if I remember correctly, that opinion piece, huge part of it was, about kids, right? Like how, teachers in classroom, essentially, indoctrinate children and stuff like that. So yeah, none of it was that. But what alarmed me though, I guess the context, I mean, I'm sure like Jeff knows that, New York Times is really prestigious, what's considered prestigious publication. And actually, like a lot of people that I know, people, like, okay, so these, well, predominantly white women, boomer generation, who call themselves like, intellectuals, basically. They read New York Times like really religiously, to the point of like religiously, and they quote from it. So what happened was like, on Twitter, I mean, if you remember, Noah, so Betty Midler quoted the article, right? And she was like so upset about it. She was so alarmed. So she is like the prime example of people who were really successfully manipulated by the opinion piece. I mean, she may not have been, TERF per se before. I mean, I don't know who she was to begin with, but I think the reaction that she had, the public, very public reaction she had that to the opinion piece was, oh my God, we are being erased. And we have to pay attention to these radical trans activists. I mean, we were named, we were like clearly named as a culprit, right? Of erasing women. So yeah, I mean, that really actually alarmed me. That was like when I personally, like my consciousness, my awareness of the issue was actually kind of awakened. And I just like really was alarmed that, okay, maybe these, turf ideologies are successfully, seeping into the mainstream. So
And that's the scary thing. They've been gaining traction. It's fucking real. Like, that's why we really need to get out there and fucking like find a way to combat the turf movement. Like I've said before, turfs are not going to really listen to us right now. We could definitely plant the seed in there, but like I said, my optimism speaks. Hopefully someday they will betray people like J.K. Rowling and fucking like follow that lead. Let's focus on the ones that aren't in the turf movement right now, because we need as much allies as we can, like on our side right now.
Yeah.
I mean, like, this whole thing is ridiculous. Like, this division is real. The turf movement has even infiltrated the gay men movement too. That's fucking depressing.
There's that guy on TikTok that, there's a couple of them. But I mean, I went toe to toe with one of them. And it was the same time there was a lesbian on TikTok, again, talking about, indoctrinating children, which is always the first talking point, right? So
Right.
It doesn't matter. I mean, here in Alberta, they're trying to take out dinosaurs being taught in school. We literally live in the place where the dinosaurs have been found. Like, we have 2 massive museums about dinosaurs, but let's erase them from the text. I mean, and this is where church and state really need to be removed. And I'm not sure why that is still allowed to be bled over. And that does have a lot to do with what's happening in America bleeding over into other places. So if we look at talking to TERFs, it really has to be lesbians fighting and women fighting. They're not listening to, first of all, they don't care if you're Demi or you're Pan or you're A or you're any other letter. They don't care. They want to talk to feminists. And a lot of these same feminists, and they're all writers. All of J.K. Rowling's minions are like, I'm a writer. Show me a thing that you've written. Like what? What did you write?
Right.
I'm so educated, I'm a writer. And, it's not even about education. It's about being able to sit and talk. They don't want to talk to anybody unless they think you're on their side. So when I go toe to toe, and it's why I get angry at people in our community that identify as female, regardless of what your letter is, why aren't you going toe to toe? What's so scary about them? What do you think they're going to do? You think they're going to fly from the UK and, stop on your door? Trust me, if police were going to get sent to a door for having a big mouth, they would be here every day.
Exactly.
Right? So it is a piece about educating softly first. Like, I tend to go in with, I know you're not an idiot, but I'm going to talk to you like you are one. Because part of me really wants to know what happened in your head. Like, where in your head did this shift? And the biggest one on J.K. Rowling's stuff, the article, was that whole trans movement is the new homophobia. Which is the article, like, that was the one that really went, okay, I've had enough. I'm done talking to you guys nicely. Now we're going to play my roles. But these pieces, like that same piece in the New York Times, was the same one that Macy Gray came out having the same rhetoric after that. There were a couple of other stars that had the same rhetoric, and they're always the same talking points: protecting children and erasing women. So my sister and I are both feminists. So when we do have conversations, and I'm like, why do you think you're being erased, though? Well, how is a trans person going to erase you? And the rhetoric that she hears that gets in their heads, right? They're listening to podcasts and all that stuff. She's like, well, but they haven't fought like we fought for our rights. And I'm like, okay, but they have fought for their own rights in their own way. And we have a lot of trans men who were women who had to fight for those rights too, who were fighting for reproductive rights. And now you're afraid that they're erasing you. And a lot of the rhetoric that came out was about the term chest feeding, where they're like,
sorry. Yeah. yeah. Sorry to interrupt. I just couldn't because okay, the New York Times article. Remember like when we were Noah when we were discussing that on this program.
Mm-hmm.
Part of it was actually funny. I mean, I don't want to say it, but it was funny because they were very very disturbed by these sort of alternative terms that we use for women, right? I mean, because it was like right after Roe v. Wade got overturned, so the organizations, progressive organizations, were trying to be inclusive. So they were saying stuff like, I don't remember exactly, but stuff like people with uterus, people with vaginas, whatever. Okay, but I mean, so they were so disturbed by that. But
Yeah.
again, to Noah's point, like I think Noah actually referred to this like when we were recording um up close and personal with you, Jess. But so they were really, really, really disturbed by this description, like person with blank, body parts. But then again, though, it's like they make it all about genitals when
Yep.
when they talk about trans people, right?
If you want,
That's like a
Tsukuru,
clear contradiction. Yes.
I actually got the article pulled up, and let me go ahead and pull it up so that way it will be easier to kind of reference if we're talking about it. So give me just a second, I can do it. Okay. Yeah, I do not mind all this, but anyway, I don't want to see the ads.
There's
So
always so
yes,
many.
this is the article. It was written on July 3rd. The far right and far left agree on one thing: women don't count. Which article? Which one were you actually? Okay, hold on.
Yeah, I mean, anyway, it's towards the end though, like when she starts talking about all these terminologies.
Hopefully I can actually. Let me see. Oh, this is the one that actually here it is. This is the one you're talking about. The noble intent behind omitting the word women is to make room for the relatively tiny number of transgender men and people identifying as non-binary who retain aspects of female biological function and can conceive, give birth, or breastfeed. But despite a spirit of inclusion, the result has been to shove women to the side.
Which is interesting because nobody cared about women, especially when it was around birthing or being pregnant, until these articles started coming out. So if you look at being pushed aside, women used to be in hospital for up to 2 weeks just for giving birth naturally. That was brought down to less than 24 hours, depending on what time of day you gave birth.
Mm-hmm.
Who cared about women then? They didn't care if you were talking about uteruses or chest feeding. Then, for a C-section, it went from almost 3.5 weeks to less than 5 days with an incredibly high rate of infection and, even severe postpartum depression. That was, what we were put in asylums for. I mean, the things that women are, and TERFs mostly, that are now concerned about, or women who are listening to TERFs, it's like, do you remember the list of 30, 40 idiotic reasons that we could be institutionalized as women for?
Mm-hmm.
Like period cramps. You could be put in an institution for your entire life. If your husband said so, you could be put in an institution for your entire life. How
Right.
are we? I mean, when women are like, well, we're being erased, I'm like, how? Did your boobs disappear? I have said, I hate to tell you, but your vagina still exists. No matter how many trans people are in the world, you still have a vagina. If you like your vagina and you're excited about your vagina, hooray, a vagina.
This is the line that actually got me though when I first read this article. Women, of course, have been accommodating. They've welcomed transgender women into their organizations. They've learned to propose any space just for biological women in situations where the presence of males can be threatening or unfair. Rape crisis centers, domestic abuse shelters, competitive sport is currently viewed by some as exclusionary. If there are other marginalized people to fight for, it's assumed women will be the ones to serve other people's agendas rather than promote their own. And this last line here, Women didn't fight this long and this hard, only to be told we couldn't call ourselves women anymore. This isn't just a semantic issue, it's also a question of moral harm and affront to our very sense of selves.
Which is interesting when people bring that up, and I let them know that the word woman itself, when you go back into history, the very first definitions were any human other than man. So the terminology woman is actually highly deplorable. Why are you worried about, let's call ourselves woman? Then that kind of got brought into meaning less than man. You know, and then you had women who were like, can't call anything a manhole because that's hurting women because everybody cares about the manhole. And you still hear that story. Remember when women didn't want it to be a manhole? Now it's a person cover. So I don't understand why anyone would be even concerned about needing to call themselves a woman, because woman, by definition, is anyone other than a man.
That whole opinion piece is just garbage, in my opinion. I mean, it like you've said, Tsukuru, like this was like a divisive article. Like
it was, but the thing is, like, you know, her logic is like throughout the opinion piece, throughout the whole thing, her logic is highly flawed. I mean, it's just really does not really stand if you like really analytically read it. But the disturbing thing, once again, is that it seems like so many have fallen for it. You know, so many bought into it. So,
and that's what's dangerous, is that it's just when you have influential people like that, like have high following, like they buy into that shit. That's why it's like important to really like combat that shit. You need to go, like, no, call that shit out.
Yeah.
Like, and that's the thing. Nobody is trying to erase women. We're trying to become a more inclusive society.
Well, and I think it's going back into the 40s. So when we're talking about lesbian, even gay history, when you go back into like the early 1900s, the community was very intensely a community. Even though we were supposed to hide in shadows, we had elaborate parties, we knew how to find each other. We lived really full lives, even though we had to be in the shadows. You know, the community really stood up for each other. It really wasn't until, again, the 60s with, you know, laws coming out and the Christo-fascist movements and things like that, that everybody broke apart and the community fell into its own letters. And women then had to fight for their own stuff. And we have fought hard. Like, we have fought hard. And I keep telling feminists, especially, our fight doesn't go away because of trans people. The fight, and I have said this on Twitter to J.K. Rowling's minions, the fight, trans people can't change the law. Show me a trans person at the top in SCOTUS that's making the laws.
Right.
They're not who's there? You have the one token chick who just walks around looking like she's on heavy medication. And then you have cis white men and one person of color. Why are you worried about trans people? I'm like, why are you fighting saying it's trans people erasing feminists, women, and lesbians when it's still men? And men. And men who don't understand enough, and men who are just afraid of losing power. At the end of the day, when you tell someone, even like J.K. Rowling, explain to me how we're being erased. We're still being erased by men. We're being erased because of misogyny in the medical system, which is killing us at alarming rates. We're being erased, actually, in a lot of different ways, none of them trans. None of them trans. What I will say is that, you know, things like TikTok and there are places where there are trans people who are not helping those of us trying to stop TERFs from occurring. They agree with TERFs. They're talking about it openly. They're, you know, saying, I will never be a woman. I was on a live actually with Lucifer Morningstar, was in the same live with a trans woman the shit that came out of her mouth was horrifying to me. And then the shit in the comments was even worse. And I was like, wow. So we're fighting TERFs now. We're fighting this kind of language on a trans platform. And when you have someone, hey, let me rephrase this. Someone sent me, there's a guy on TikTok who nobody likes. And he talks about he's a British Asian guy, but he talks about how queer people don't know how to fight anymore. That they're yelling at people, they're demanding people, and it's like that's not how anything was ever won. So somebody sent it to me and was like, "Can you believe this guy?" And I'm like, "But he's not wrong though. If you want to change the minds of people, we're always in a defense of going, no, but let me put it to you this way." And the reason why suffragettes were really good at stuff and lesbians is that we have this uncanny ability to make men think that they thought of it first.
So a couple things first. I actually want to go ahead and share my screen again because I've been referencing the Trevor Project for a while. So I want to share this with people so people know. Just by orientation, and like I said, this was done last year and this was published in 2022. 46% of lesbian youth have considered suicide in the past year, and 13% have attempted suicide.
Yeah.
This is how real it is getting. With anxiety and depression, actually, let me go ahead and pull this up. 75% of lesbian youth are experiencing symptoms of anxiety, and 57% are experiencing symptoms of depression. The fuck is wrong?
Yeah.
This is actually very, very fucking scary. And with all this anti-LGBTQ plus legislation that's going to be coming out, those numbers are only going to go up. They're not going to go down. I don't know why people have this logic thinking that if we go ahead and remove all this safe stuff, it's going to go down. The fuck? You are not listening to the science. And I actually want to go ahead and highlight this comment just because it's a question. Can you go ahead and actually explain about the TERF movement, just in case people don't know what it is? I can tell you it's a vile garbage movement.
It is a vile garbage movement. So TERF stands for Trans Exclusionary Radical Feminist. So a lot of women would just be classified as a feminist regardless. And then radical feminist kind of was what we were called when we got out there, and really we were the ones with the megaphones, right? Radical feminists were about changing laws and about, sort of spitting in the face of lawmakers, right? And we have some like Madeline Tres was a radical feminist and one of our most important lesbians that nobody knows about. So what has happened is there are a lot of feminists, women in general, and lesbians who believe that trans people are taking away from us. We are being erased, and their feminism, their fight for human rights, because let's be honest, radical feminism is at the core of everything, fighting for human rights overall. Maybe less for old, fat white men, but underneath that umbrella. So what has happened is there's this movement to completely eradicate trans people from the alphabet. In fact, it's not even just trans, because when you get down to it, they're not including any of the other alphabet letters either, including 2S, which really pisses me off. So when we look at the lesbian gay bi alliance, it is erasing all of the other letters and specifically blaming it on trans people. It is a movement of trying to convince women, which is not hard when you have very huge platform educated women telling you this is what's happening, making trans people out to be groomers, which again is not new. Lesbians and gay men, we were called groomers all the way since the dawn of time, to create fear of losing our own rights, even though, oh right, Roe versus Wade was the first one overturned. So y'all were sleeping. And the trans people didn't do that. Y'all were sleeping. So this movement is to blame everything on trans people and to kind of hunker down and make it, we're back to women only, that trans people can't possibly understand. So trans people can't understand what it's like to give birth, even though trans men have given birth or can give birth or could decide to give birth. And what does giving birth have? Giving birth did not make me more of a woman. All it did was give me saggy boobs and a gunt. It did nothing to make me more or less of a woman at all.
Mhm.
It's that they are dismantling the rights that we have fought so hard for, despite that not having any credence or clout at all. So the TERF movement is specifically a propaganda machine to blame everything on one particular group. So again, trans exclusionary radical feminists. And most people who are TERFs, I don't find feminists. When I have conversations with them, they're not feminists. They want to be the wife with the husband and the kids. And I stay at home, which there's nothing wrong with that. But that really wasn't the feminist movement. You know, feminists were angry. We wanted the vote. We wanted bank accounts. We wanted mortgages. We wanted the right to divorce, which, by the way, there are still a ton of countries in the world that cannot get a divorce legally. So,
oh, go ahead.
sorry,
Go ahead.
I can't remember what I was going to say now.
I was going to say, so why do you think so many lesbians have bought into this TERF rhetoric?
Oh, you know, we talked about this in the up close and personal. I do think that a lot of lesbians buy into it because they haven't had really their time in the spotlight as lesbians. Again, when you look back through our history, there's not even a lot of writing on it. So there's a lot of it's my turn to be the cool kid sort of phenomenon. Lesbians also were not accepted by men and were not accepted by women. So there's this need for acceptance and validation. And who better to be validated by than J.K. Rowling and a bunch of writers none of us have ever heard of? Whereas for me as a lesbian and a woman, my whole thing is I just want everyone to be safe and happy and joyful. You know, and I don't understand why anyone, especially when we're talking about mothers, you're mad about the term chest feeding, but you'd rather see dead kids. I don't get it. I don't get how you can make being a woman about being a mother, because that's a lot of their argument. I don't understand. I look at my kids, and as long as they're happy and healthy and alive, that's what's important, not who they're doing, what they're doing. It blows my mind. You can't make it about being a mother, but then want dead children. You can't make it about don't talk to me and don't objectify me as my organs, but trans people don't understand because they don't have the organs.
That's why I said their logic makes no sense. That's why I personally don't engage with TERFs, because they give me a fucking headache. It's like you can't be one thing or the other.
They give me a headache too, but it's very cathartic. I have literally talked to my therapist about how hard I go at TERFs and asked if it was like an issue, like if I needed to be medicated. The answer was no. It was very cathartic. Have at her, go hard. And I do. So all the anger that I have around the dumbest things in life, that is where I channel my anger. But I have the ability, and I don't know if it's a British thing, but I'm very sarcastic. And a lot of the biggest TERFs are British because they are following J.K. Rowling. So I can go toe to toe with the same language that they're also not used to. So the other piece of the TERF movement is that the biggest TERFs coming from the UK have zero respect for Americans. Mm-hmm. So they don't really care what any of you have to say. And I really truly believe the TERF movement is a movement to get back to a woman's places in the home. It is an anti-radical feminist movement. It's an anti-feminist movement, and it's an anti-woman movement. But if women came out and said, guys, listen, I really need you to just, have the babies, raise the babies, stop thinking about the work, there would be hell on. So the only way to kind of sneak that in is to make it about trans people removing women's rights and erasing women. Because I'm like, listen, I'm not even losing a pound, let alone getting erased. What's happening? I'm more concerned about the issues that actually affect women. Trans people do not affect women. And don't get me wrong, there's assholes in the trans community. There's assholes in the lesbian community. Lesbians are just so easily swayed. They're so angry. And they want, oh, I hate to say this because I'm probably one of them, slightly attention seeking, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand how after Roe versus Wade, like even if this turf movement took off and then Roe versus Wade happened and you went, holy shit, while we were busy over here going, look over there, the trans people are erasing you because you thought you were in the game of Jumanji and you were being sucked in the game. When you noticed that it was a bunch of men taking that away, what? And then we look at the turf movement in the UK removing Boris Johnson, who was anti-trans, also an American politician pretending to be British. We look at, her name is Liz Truss. So she has just been appointed in succession of Boris Johnson. She is a Tory, which is conservative, Republican, all the same stuff. She is vehemently anti-trans. Vehemently. Like, bring back more conversion camps, anti-trans. And then anti-lesbian, anti-everything. They have put her in the place of Boris Johnson because she is a woman. So they're like, hey, listen, women weren't quite buying it from Boris Johnson because he didn't even know what a hairbrush was. If we make it a well-coiffed woman, they'll start to pay attention. This is all, it's all the diversion. It's just a distraction from what's really going on. If you're busy listening to this rhetoric, you're not paying attention to what's going through. Just like nobody paid attention to in the Don't Say Gay bill, they were trying to sneak in lowering the age of children to be married, female children specifically, into grade school age. Why are you listening to people saying trans people are grooming, gay men are grooming, lesbians are grooming, when it's white cis men trying to lower the age of marriage to a child?
Yep, that's what I said. They all got serious projection issues. They just want to fucking like take what they're doing it and blame it on other fucking people. It's like and I'll like a reminder too. There is a show here in America. It always disgusted me, and I don't even know, frankly, why it was fucking even on air. But I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It was called Toddlers and Tiaras.
Yes.
They're sitting there talking about how we're sexualizing children with the drag community. What the fuck was that about on Toddlers and Tiaras? Subjecting these fucking young children to wear skimpy ass outfits, wear all this makeup and shit like that, and they're too young. Like, what the fuck are you doing?
They do that even in the dance community. So I'm a dance mom, and the costumes that they have 5, 6-year-olds wearing are again hypersexualized. A lot of moms bypass this. They're just letting it occur because as long as the kid has the solo, though, so the talking points that they have make no sense when you break it all down. And again, I think it goes deeper than just projection. I think it is on purpose deflection and distraction. Because women would rather, again, just like I said, lesbians and gay men would rather throw trans people under the bus because they think it's not coming for them. Women truly believe that they threw the LGBTQ community under the bus, they wouldn't come for our rights. So we yell about the incorrect things, right? And God forbid if you're a lesbian and a feminist, because if I had $1 for every time I was told I just haven't had the right D, or if I just had some D, I wouldn't be so angry about women's issues. It's all about the magical penis. So, and I mean, like I said on my up close and personal, I overcompensated. So I've yet to find a penis that made me less lesbian or less of an angry woman. So I don't know where the magical penis is, but I have yet to find it, and I don't want to. But that's the thought process, even from women. Like if you just And I'm like, I don't know if you guys know this, but we have better orgasms. So I don't know. Are you okay? Are you okay? You know, and I think, you know, going back to sort of the lesbian community wanting their time in the sun, like it's a freaking competition. I don't understand it. I don't understand why lesbians are so mad about the trans community other than deflection. And I think a lot of them are easily swayed. I think the internet and the television has, you've got a magic stick, oh yeah. Okay then. Uh, they're easily swayed by what they see on the internet, and they're easily swayed by what they think is going to help them in the long run, despite in our history knowing that never ever occurred. There was always punishment, even when we weren't the ones under attack. We were still punished, and a lot of us would pass to be able to get laws either made or undone by people not realizing that we were indeed lesbians. So, but once they found out we were lesbian, it was game over, right? So again, anyone's watching, if you have not looked up Madeline Tres, she wrote a book, Rainbows on My Ceiling. She was one of the first lesbians in Washington, but got busted frequenting some clubs that were very lesbian clubs. And it's really unfortunate, but she was tenacious. I mean, she then went to San Francisco and became a big part of those community and starting more activism like around the lavender menaces and how, and this is why, you know, purple lavender is a big part of the lesbian community around the color and the lapras that was on the flag. And but I will say lesbians like to get mad about everything. Like not all, but a good 98%. And you, all the lesbians, come fight me because you will prove my point that you're mad about anything. So we're fiery. You know, we're like the gingers of the gay community. And I can say that because I don't know if you know this, but this is not my natural hair color. So I am a ginger. So I can say that we are the gingers of the LGBTQ community. And we do get fiery and we will stand and we will link arms and we don't, you know, we're okay if we get crushed by a tank, you know? But we are allowing this deflection because we think it will save us at the end of the day. And it won't.
Right. Tsukuru, you've been kind of quiet, so I kind of want to get your perspectives on this.
Yeah, okay, so I was quiet because I was just really intrigued by what Jess was saying, and yeah, really agree with you, Jess. Okay, so here's the thought that I was having. And again, it's about Japan because I just can't help myself. I've been in the States for 32 years, but it's still my homeland, and I pay attention to what's happening. So what's ironic and what's alarming right now, and I talked about this, I think, in Up Close and Personal, but I've been losing my sleep every night because I got into this habit of going through like Twitter timeline and looking specifically for these people who translate turf news from the West. Because at the end of the day, that's like always, what LGBTQ community in Japan, feminist movement in Japan look to. We look to the West, and we, translate the text from the West, right? So, and alarming number of people are translating, news from the West, and introducing them to Japan, right? So right now, every night, every fucking night, and I should really stop, honestly, because I am really losing sleep over this. But I see like 2-3 news, just thank you. You can commiserate later, but anyway, yeah. So all these like disturbing news that they are translating and like just kind of adapting, like you can actually read in Japanese all these like turf ideologies, like straight up, it's like a literal translation. But the irony, I noticed, irony is that these ideologies, these um, logics were are employed by the most um, fundamentalist people in Japan, though, people who want to put women back into their place, right? In their house, in their childbearing position. People who claim that unless you have babies, you are not productive member of society. These people are adopting and employing tough ideologies. So it's not kind of, but it's very, very ironic to me that they're labeled as radical feminists.
But
You
they're
know,
just adopting that label, though. That's the thing. They're not radical feminists. They're the
Nope.
same women that pointed and said, "My neighbor's a witch because she was hotter than you." They're the same women that want more babies born. And this all comes down to what's disgusting is this all comes down to money. The more babies made, especially white babies, the more money countries make. They're a commodity to continue making money out of, especially women and those kids growing up and working minimum wage jobs and keeping the rat race going and making billionaires more money. It has nothing to do with feminism. They have adopted that because women who are perhaps a little less educated or again have been sort of away from LGBTQ plus IA communities don't know what's going on. What they have are a lot of gay male perspective because that's been the longest, largest perspective given. Lesbians always, we have Rosie O'Donnell. Like your lesbian perspective is a league of their own. You never even look up what that baseball team was about and what it was for and how many lesbians were on that. And the women who couldn't even get married who made that baseball team for all the Americans to go see. They're not radical feminists. They're just Christo-fascists. And I think part of dismantling TERF nonsense is calling them out for what they are. They don't care about women's rights. They want you pregnant and barefoot in a kitchen. They want you not having a vote. They want you not, able to work and make your own money and have independence. They want it to go back to the 30s and 40s because in that same, we see TERF ideology in the New Yorker. You see this ideology around how women were coerced. We were duped and tricked by feminists to go out and get a job and be independent so that we would have to pay more taxes. And that that there's no such thing as feminism. We didn't really need the vote. This was all a trick by feminists, really just and that gets blamed on the lesbians, lesbians who didn't want to stay at home and have babies, which is weird because lots of lesbians want babies, folks. So there's that secondary going on where women are being told that this was a dupe. If you had been staying home, looking after your children would not be, doing all these heathen things and having thoughts, and they would be still in the church and they would still be, women would be women and men would be men.
See, that's why I never really took the TERF movement seriously anyway, because, they're claiming to be feminists. It's like, well, what about the other fucking feminists out there that have been fucking saying hey, they're doing damage to that and they're making women really look bad. And it's just like, the fuck, do you realize what the hell you're doing? I think they do.
They do, and they don't care. The
Yeah,
point
they don't care.
That's why they like, Philippine governments where there's no divorce. You must be with a man. That is what they want. Despite the fact that, you can put all these laws back in place, you still go all the way back to the time periods where we were still queer and in the shadows, and eventually we started throwing bricks. Eventually, we started doing sit-ins. Eventually, even with the AIDS epidemic, forcing the right to have access to medications, forcing the right to look at how biopsychosocial programs don't allow for people to have access to medical care. But if we look at, like, even as Canadians, they're trying to privatize healthcare here, and we look at America and go, you guys are just in debt. You're in debt for being sick. You're in debt for dying. You're in debt for living. You're in debt for giving birth. You're in debt for everything. But you're going to be worried about the word cis or chest beating or whether women are being erased. I will be erased by a heart attack or by the Western medicine forgetting that I exist long before my rights are erased because of a trans person, even if that was happening, which it's not.
See, our healthcare system in America sucks. And that's like why I fucking get pissed off when people are having conversations just like what you're having, like what you explained. It's like, do you not realize what the fuck is going around? People don't have access to healthcare. There are still many LGBTQIA plus youth that are getting thrown onto the street because there's lack of acceptance and lack of education.
Yeah.
There's a lot of trans people that can't get access to hormones.
Yeah.
They can't get their surgeries. And even if they do have health care, they still fear about going to the doctor because they're being afraid of being discriminated against.
Well, I don't know what in the US. Sorry, before I forget, in the UK, somebody who has had cervical cancer multiple times, who requires a hysterectomy, that would be covered by the National Health Services because you've had cancer, have a hysterectomy. Once you come out as trans, they take it off the table. It's no longer covered. So the recurrence of cervical cancer is like 1,000,000,000%. Like having it one time in your lifetime and having it cured is really, really small. So they would rather you die from cervical cancer than give a person a hysterectomy because they've now come out trans.
That's just fucking depressing.
Right? And this is a progressive country, but anytime that you have progressive countries with conservative Republican Tory governments, again, all same, they deflect. And they want to, again, look over there so that you're not noticing what's going on. And then if women think it's about removing women's rights, I hate to tell them, we didn't have a lot to begin with.
Right.
You have Canadians going, listen, though, Roe versus Wade being overturned can't happen here. We're in Canada. So glad I'm in Canada. I'm like, you realize it's only just decriminalized here. It's what they do here is covert. They just take away the access. So the building doesn't exist. The ability to have one somewhere when you have no staff in a hospital and they have removed all the buildings means you just can't get one. Not that you weren't allowed to get one. You just couldn't. So all of this still occurs. And I still think the loudest feminists tend to be lesbians. So we take a lot of the flack. And the glomming on of people like J.K. Rowling, even to the lesbian community, she had a tweet with a picture that was like, the lesbian community told me I'm like 79% queer anyway.
Oh my God, I hate that shit. I also heard J.K. Rowling wrote another fucking novel under her little pseudonym.
So the pseudonym is actually the person who invented conversion therapy.
And just for the record, though, like my field here in America, at least, like we're trying to ban conversion therapy because it basically goes against ethical codes. It's wrong.
Yeah,
because our ethical codes basically state like, hey, do not impose your values onto your clients. And conversion therapy does exactly that. They impose their own values onto their people that they work with.
But we all had, who remembers when it was no church and state, that there must be a division of church? When did that? I mean, I know it never completely stopped, but it's like nobody cares. We're just like, no. That blows my mind. There was a question that came up that I didn't read fast enough.
Was it this one?
Yes. Yes, they do. That's exactly it. So just, yeah. Same as what we're talking about, just home having babies. They don't even care about medical progression around women who identify as female, cis women who can't have babies, or the fact that there are a lot of trans men who are quite okay with having babies.
Right.
You know,
just like, why are we even having this argument? But, then again, we already kind of know. Yeah, TERFs are not feminists. They're fascist. They need to be fucking stopped.
correct.
I mean, it scares a lot of trans people to confront them, like, because they get really nasty online. Like, I mean, I've only had like a couple of encounters of real life TERFs, like outside of online. And I know, Tsukuru, you kind of had an encounter with a TERF.
Yeah, well, I have to say, I kind of didn't pay attention because I mean, it just kind of came and went.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're getting
other than like these like past 2 weeks or so that I started like reading timelines to look for these like Japanese people who translate TERF ideologies religiously. Other than that, I just kind of I am probably on Twitter like for 5 minutes a day. Yeah. So,
well, here we go. Here's something. Can you address the ignorance that some lesbians display about trans women, particularly trans lesbians? We aren't straight men. You want to go ahead and take that away?
Who, me?
Yep.
Well, I mean, we're talking about a group of people who, again, are not very educated. They want to be angry about stuff because a lesbian is a woman who is attracted to other women. So the group of women, and it's the same as like, we have a group of women that are, the lesbians who are biphobic. There's all these different groups and people talk about the groups, but there's not a lot of conversations going on where people can discuss it openly. And one of the problems that I do find is that you can't discuss anything without people being so angry. And then there's not a lot of, let's just sit down and discuss why we feel this way. So nobody really knows why anybody feels a certain way. I don't know why anyone would care about anybody being a lesbian. The only time I am irritated is when men say the oldest joke in the book, I'm a lesbian trapped in a straight man's body. Then you're trans. And then they don't like that. But as far as for me, trans women are women. So if a trans woman is attracted to women, she is a lesbian.
Right.
When I hear people saying that can't be, then I know that they're gatekeepers. And that's where we get into all of, both with lesbians, gays, and bisexuals, becoming gatekeepers of the community and thinking that they can tell everybody else how they can or can't be or what that looks like. So I have not personally actually come across a lot of lesbians that have the balls to talk to me and say they don't believe there's such a thing as a trans woman lesbian, mostly because I think I frighten people. So I do, anyone who's watching this, if you ever want to tag me and shit, tag me. Because I just don't understand that. And I know it happens. And I know there's a lot of hatred both to trans women and trans men from the lesbian community, especially recently. A lot of hatred to non-binary, which is weird because the 80s was a lot about being non-binary. And again, the lesbians, because we weren't really allowed in anything, we were the ones out on the street with the trans community, with the bisexual community, unless they were bisexual men. And that's where pride started. We were the misfits. We were standing up, and the lesbians were fighting for everyone else in this community to have a place, to have a safe place, to have a voice. So I don't understand it. I don't have an answer for that. But if you find one, please tag me. I will hurt them emotionally.
This is important. I wanted to highlight that. Your sexuality is no one's right to label but your own. Trans women can be lesbians just as trans men can be gay men. Fucking men.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Fucking men. And you know that gatekeeping that you're talking about with the non-binary community, it happens in the trans community. I mean, I've seen some trans men really gatekeep against the non-binary community. It's like, what the actual fuck? Why are you sitting there like treating them like this? Like, I had an encounter with a trans woman actually, kind of outside of offline. Like, I was talking to her about my network, and she pretty much flat out told me, well, the non-binary community is a fad and they need to stop making the trans community look bad. It's like, but aren't we called a fad? Isn't the trans community called a fad?
Yeah.
They are just as valid as you and me.
Listen, lesbians were called a phase. We've all been called. You know, I have a shirt that says straight was the phase, and I find it hilarious. I love wearing that shirt because it confuses people so much and they don't realize why it confuses them, right? So first of all, I don't understand. This is why I just like, and I never liked the word queer, but I really love the word queer now. If we were the queer community and we were fighting for human rights, the infighting can stop, where we're just fighting for everyone to have human rights and the right to be and exist safely and fighting against those same beasts. Instead, we want to be like, trans women can't be lesbians. What do you care? Are you sleeping with them? And you never know. Like, you never know. I do get the labels because I don't even particularly like the lesbian label anymore. I do call myself queer far more than I call myself lesbian because I'm struggling with associating with a lot of lesbians that I do know. Like, I'm struggling.
That statement that you made right there, that's important. The fact like that this whole thing that's going on with TERFs, like, it's basically people like kind of like abandoning that label. First of all, I really don't like labels, period. There's days I don't even like to be referred to as trans because of the fact that it kind of reinforces the stigma a little bit, right? Because we were talking about we are human beings, we're not a species. But then you kind of look at it, it's like, okay, the trans community. Okay, what is that kind of like saying to an ordinary person that doesn't know? They're basically saying, oh, well, they are human beings. It's just trans people. Okay, like, see, but then in the same breath, I get conflicted, though, because I am proud of who I am.
Yeah, I'm really proud of who I am. I don't know if I'm not proud of the community currently because of their behaviors.
Right.
Which, you know, it does create this conflict. They are evil, for sure.
They are necessary evil.
They hate it. And I have talked with my friends, especially in the lesbian community, who have trans male partners. And what is the label for that? There's not even a label for that.
Mm-hmm.
We went, whatever, you're good.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so again, lesbians are like, no, let's not say chest feeding, but not like, what does that look like? I don't know all the labels. I don't know. And I think people should be able to label themselves, like whatever you feel comfortable with. I have called myself a giant homo about 1 million times. Why? Because I like using the labels that people are going to use against me, and I use it first, right? Mm-hmm. So if I meet somebody, I'll make fat jokes long before they can make a fat joke. I will make them feel uncomfortable before I ever feel uncomfortable, right? That's kind of who I am. It's not necessarily healthy. Yeah, I have a therapist. Don't worry, guys. But it becomes, I don't know who we're fighting anymore. Every day you wake up and there's like a new little group of an argument or a fight. What do I care if you are a trans woman who is a lesbian? I'm already married, so you're not taking away anyone from me. So sorry about your luck, other lesbians. Be hotter, be funnier, be smarter, be the things. No one's stealing your next wife from you. That's not happening. No one's stealing this pool of people from you. And it's none of your damn business.
I think that's like the grandstanding message point right there. It is none of your damn business. Like, for real, it really isn't anybody's business on like who they are. You know what I'm saying? If we're comfortable saying something, we're going to say something. I mean, I could tell you like a little bit with my personal interactions with the lesbian community. I have no issues with the lesbian community, but I remember I came out as trans. I had the lesbian community supporting me and it was all good. But the moment that my kid came out as trans, then it was like, oh my God, okay, now we're going to go back to misgendering this person. Now we're going to go ahead and say, well, I've gotten comments such as, you're such a bad mother for letting your son transition. It's like, why are we having this conversation? Like, what happened to like the point, like, you were supporting me and now you're not like going to be supportive just because my kid comes out as trans? The fuck is your problem?
Yeah. Well, and then the next time they hear something from someone saying, you know, the trans community grooms children, you become the fodder for that.
Mm-hmm. But see, that's why I call TERFs groomers. They want to focus so much on anatomy, fucking let them be that way. Like, okay, here's like another experience that I had. My kid, I had to take my kid to go get her blocker because she hadn't had her blocker in like a month and a half because I didn't have health care. Went to Kaiser out here in the Bay Area in Oakland, and basically I could tell like the doctor was a TERF. I mean, I smelled the TERF like vibes in it. I mean, like she had Harry Potter posters like hanging off in the doctor's office. I was like, I already knew this was going to be fucking bad. But anyway, my daughter went in there and, you know, she expressed interest in wanting to do the injections because she's 14, but she wanted to like do that because she'd been taking the pill. And as most people know, the pill is not really effective though, to be honest, because like you're only getting a little bit of the pill and the effect of it. So like essentially she wanted to do the injections. This lady had the nerve to tell me, he's like, I don't feel comfortable like prescribing the injections to her. And I'm like, okay, so what do you do with trans boys? Oh, we give them the injections. The fuck? Okay, so you're okay giving trans boys injections, but not trans girls injections. And then it got even fucking worse. She wanted to examine my daughter. And, you know, to some degree, I kind of understand because she had been off the blocker for a little bit and wanted to make sure everything was all good. My daughter like described it, but she was so insisting on looking down her pants. And my daughter said, no, I do not want you looking down my pants. I'm telling you what I see, and I think that's good enough. All of a sudden, she excused me out of the room. She's like, can you go sit in the room? Out of the room. My daughter's like, no, I do not want my dad out of the room. I want my dad in the room. But she kicked me out of the room anyway. And apparently, she actually physically did try to go down my daughter's pants. Twice just to see. And then my daughter came out. She was not talkative. I knew she had been traumatized.
Yeah.
My daughter has PTSD. Like, so I can see it all
the time. Traumatized by that.
Talk. Say what?
I would be traumatized by that.
Yeah. And she almost didn't even want to get the blocker. Like, she had a panic attack. I'm like, okay, what's wrong? Just breathe. Play on her tablet. I can't do that. I'm like, well, what's going on? And she told me later when we got home, it's like, Dad, she tried to look down my pants. She actually she saw my stuff. And I'm just like, I got grossed by that. And I fucking went and I bitched her out. I'm like, first of all, don't you ever put your hands on my child like that again. Okay. And second of all, the fuck is this bullshit about that you won't give her the injection because you think the pill works better? Like, she was making like arguments saying that the pill works a lot better.
The pill has never worked better.
Exactly.
It doesn't even work as a pill. Like,
right.
It has never worked better. And each person's digestive system is completely different. From a medical standpoint, injectables are always the best way. That's why if you take oral antibiotics for 2 weeks and it doesn't clear up, you get to go on home parenteral therapy because you need the drugs administered through injection. So if pills were better, we wouldn't still have IVs, y'all. Like, we didn't progress that far. It's me, and this is the stuff that makes me mad. So as a lesbian and as a mom of 3, and all 3 of my kids have we have a genetic condition, so all 3 of them have their own expression of the genetic condition. So we spent a lot of time in the medical system, and as a lesbian with a wife, let me tell you, that has not even been easy at this age. We get the friends can't come back. I'm like, who brings their friend to the hospital with their kid at 3 o'clock in the morning? Like, I don't have, my friends are not that cool. Like, no, I'm sleeping with her. That's why we have matching hair. Damn it. So why aren't we shutting up about all this nonsense about whether trans people can be lesbians or what, and fighting for children's, especially children's rights, for them to have a freaking voice. At 14, I had a baby. I had surgery to have that baby. I was one of the first people to have laparoscopic surgery because I had endometriosis. And this is back in a time period where they believed endometriosis only happened to menopausal or perimenopausal women. They did not know it happened to teenagers. You are just a hypochondriac. So when laparoscopic surgery was invented, they decided that, because before they would just open you up and go, yeah, you have endo, and close you back up. So they were like, we can burn this off. And they were like, you have a 5-month window to try and get pregnant, which I did. So I was allowed to make a conscious decision to have a surgery to specifically get pregnant on purpose and get married to a Catholic all by my lonesome. But I can't figure out who I am as a person or what I need from my own health care. They don't have a problem putting every single kid on an IUD or on birth control pills. It's become normalized, right? So if we look at even just the Mirena has been found to find brain disease I actually have from an antibiotic, a disease called intracranial hypertension, which is a brutal, horrible, debilitating, chronic, incurable brain swelling, spine swelling disorder. It's awful. They know the Mirena causes that. They still put it in 14-year-olds.
And see,
we know that puberty blockers reversal rate is almost 100%. What are you upset about? And it's not your kid.
And on top of that, too, let me just go ahead and put a reminder out there. The TERF movement has even infiltrated some of the trans community, too. I mentioned this, too. I believe it was on Up Close and Personal. There's 2 conservative people, Blair White and Buck Angel, and they are promoting this misinformation about puberty blockers, saying that we're basically trying to experiment on children. And all I can think to myself is like, wait a minute. You are transition. Think about that time in your childhood where you wanted to be, like, I'll take Buck Angel, like where you wanted to be a man. Think about how you were feeling, and then think about like how all these other youth are feeling, and and they have that opportunity to live themselves authentically, but you're basically saying no, they can't.
Yeah.
The fuck is wrong with you?
But they're not saying we can't use puberty blockers in the medical field, because they're not even truly aware of all the places that puberty blockers are utilized. And my whole thing is, again, I have said as a mom, I would rather a kid that's on puberty blockers that it wasn't reversible, they were in that very small amount, than a dead kid. Absolutely. Lucifer, I said the same thing in the last episode, was that they've been used it with gymnastics. Overexhaustion has created puberty blockers in a lot of kids in sports. It is used in cisgender children for those who have early menses, which can happen even in toddlers. It's used for a multitude of reasons. And again, your kid's getting a medication is between you and the doctor, not between you and the damn world. Period. And there are so many things going on that it just blows. We have so many big issues. That's not an issue. The fact that, kids that are impoverished can't even get any health care at all, but you're worried about puberty blockers.
Here's a comment, and I remember this. Blair White did say that. She publicly said her straight cis male fiance wasn't straight because he was dating her. That I do remember that shit. It's like, what the actual fuck? Blair White, by the way, is garbage.
I think even from smaller creators that are against puberty blockers, And at the very least, even if you're trans or you're lesbian and you don't agree with puberty blockers, it buys kids time to figure out what they're doing. You want them to go to therapy, extensive therapy. We got kids skinning cats alive and putting their heads on sticks that don't get asked to go to therapy the way that trans kids get told they have to go to therapy. So you want them to do this extensive therapy, but they're limited by time. And women in general know this time constraint. We are constantly on a biological clock. Lesbians, if you come out as a lesbian, the first thing your parents say is they start to cry and go, "What about grandchildren?" So that this is all about babies. It's not about whether or not I off myself. It's whether or not I can provide you with grandchildren. So we know the time constraints, especially as lesbians, of all the women in the community. We know that you are on this ticking clock to figure out if you can have babies, if you can adopt, if you can use a surrogate, if you can get a donor. The L word made it look real easy. You just get your neighbor and a turkey baster and bada boom, everybody's pregnant. That's not how it goes. So if you're so concerned, here's my thing. If you want to argue about puberty blockers or even the birth control pill or IUDs or whatever, start advocating for safer medications, safer hormones, safer blockers, safer everything. Start demanding we have safer medicines and the medical system in general is safer. That doesn't have to be an argument.
Yep. Thank you. Yep. I mean, that's really, that is it. I mean, I think, this deflection must stop because, when we started talking about Marjorie Taylor Greene's bill, some people saying that, like, okay, this profit-centered medical industry, is actually dishing out, hormones and dishing out gender-affirming surgeries because, they can make more profits. Well, that's not trans people's problem. Actually, it's a problem of, how the medical industry in this country is structured and how, we lack really healthcare in this country. That's the actually root cause, and that's the issue that we have to be talking about. It's not about trans people. If for a fact, some doctors or some medical institutions are dishing out hormones and gender-affirming care or gender-affirming surgeries because, for profit motive, then we have to take out profit motive, out of medical industry. That's what we have to tackle. But instead, we are getting blamed, right? As if we are the problem. We are not.
Lesbians, and myself included, when we go through menopause, we are often dismissed as we're kind of less than women somehow. It took a year of my hormones being completely tanked at zero, where I couldn't stop crying, to even be allowed to get blood work, to have my hormones tested, to be given hormones, despite the fact that I had a hysterectomy at 23. So I had been through menopause. This was just a tank, and it was bad, and I needed a boost. So they're not dishing it out, whether it's for profit or not for profit. It's really complicated. And they would rather see you suffer. And this has a lot to do with, again, if we fix women's healthcare, we fix a lot of healthcare issues, including trans healthcare issues. And that's what lesbians should be fighting for, proper healthcare for everybody, because we have the loudest voices. We are used as guinea pigs. We, especially in the BIPOC community, used as guinea pigs, but we stay silent. But then all of a sudden there's something stupid over here, and women are like, oh, well, now I really want to be vocal about something I know nothing about, that doesn't affect me in any way, shape, or form. Now I'm going to be loud about it. Because you're too afraid to go, hey, by the way, I would really like to have access to hormones without having to jump through hoops because my blood work supports it. I would like my children to be able to get medical care because they know what they need, or what they want, or to be able to discuss it openly. But again, I just think this is all deflective fodder.
actually, before we close, I wanted to ask you a question though, because I saw this trending on Twitter for a while. Terps were trying to get the idea that the L should be removed from the acronym.
The L, they actually want it removed, and there's a lot of lesbians who just want to be their own group.
Yes, that's pretty much what I was seeing on Twitter.
So it started with the Lesbian Gay Bi Alliance. And then, unfortunately, whenever gay men are involved, lesbians kind of get eaten up, right? So, like I said, I think a lot of lesbians are feeling like it's our time to shine, folks. So I'm like, what does it matter if we're all just walking around and we've come up with a new name? I'm still a lesbian. At the end of the day, I still prefer women. I'm still going to be with a woman. I don't care what you guys want to do, but it's all about let's be our own group, guys. And it's like we have tried to do that. But at the end of the day, most lesbians really do want to see our community thrive and be a community. So we will always still go to the underdog. This is the loudest I've seen it, and it's being run by straight white women telling lesbians to be on their own. And a lot of that fodder came from those luncheons with the lesbians that were hanging out with J.K. Rowling, big luncheon that they had. And it was all about supporting J.K. Rowling because of Andrea Bailey? Where it was, she was fired for spewing trans hate, and that women who have fought for their rights should never be fired for spewing hate. And her funding that, and that's really where this movement started, and now wanting lesbians to just be on their own, which will affect the bisexual community because that biphobia will get bigger, and it's not going to be pretty, and I still don't understand it. What do you gain from it? What do you gain from all of this hate? What do you gain from being a trans person that goes on J.K. Rowling's Twitter and saying, I don't really care what she says, it doesn't affect me? Yes, it does. And people, no matter who you are, even if you're a cis straight person, this will affect you. This shit capitalism does not have a trickle down effect. Hatred does.
That actually reminds me, now we're getting close to time, and I want to give you both an opportunity to give a closing thoughts. I'll go last, of course, but whoever wants to go first on any closing thoughts. You can go, Jess. You are our newest member, so let's have you go.
I think, as far as the lesbian community, to everyone out there that's lesbian or no so lesbian, again, we need to come back and be reminded of our roots. And I know there's not a lot written down, but there is some amazing history of who we are as a community. I highly, highly encourage everybody to watch. If you have Amazon, it's just called Pride, and it is a history of our entire community that has a lot of lesbian history in it, our groups, our marches, and what we have been trying to do since the dawn of time.
You froze for a minute. Okay, so it looks like Jess may have a little bit of a technical difficulty going on.
Right.
Tsukuru, do you want to go ahead and just go with your closing?
Yeah. I was actually kind of thinking about maybe I should say something in relation to the lesbian community because that's what the title of the show is. But I actually, I really, can't without going into like the whole history, my own personal history. So I'm not gonna do that. Instead, I think what I'm left with today, I think what's the most important thing is what Jeff said about this it's the whole thing is deflection, right? So let's face it, talking about the United States right now, frankly, this country is broken. Let's not kid ourselves. This country is broken. Everything about this country, starting with healthcare, housing, how many houseless people on the street, in every given city in the United States. Something is really insane. Look at the price of rent. We talk about all the time, right? No,
Yeah, we do. We do
it's
talk about that
insane.
all the
It's
time.
insane. It's actually, this country is becoming unlivable for most people. And then again, when the situation is so desperate that it's really the time that we go out onto the street and just demand more, demand to change this country. Here's this Marjorie Taylor Greene's bill talk about how dangerous trans people are. I mean, come on, it's ridiculous. Just um, clearly we are being used, to so that people won't pay attention to the most important things, most pressing matters in this country. So, I just want to thank Jess uh, for reminding us of that, even though the main theme of this conversation today was the lesbian community, that's like the huge, um, yeah, huge thing that I'm left with. Let's just let's pay attention to the most important things and not about how dangerous trans people are, how we are grooming supposedly children. Yeah.
That's such a garbage argument. Jess had some technical difficulties. Hopefully, we can bring her on again here soon. I also want to say in my closing, okay, trans rights are human rights. Trans women are women. Trans men are men. Plain and simple. The lesbian community, all I got to say is please listen to your other siblings in the acronym. We all need to be in solidarity with each other. We need to stop wasting time on performative bullshit conversations and realize what's going on. It's going to affect you too. So even if you say it's all all of our fault, it's going to affect you too at the end. So let's say that you happily, like, you are able to erase us. What's going to happen to you? You think that they're going to save you? No. You'll be thrown right under the bus. It's time that we need to actually stand together and fight. And I actually am going to go throw ahead and throw the protest on here. So on October 1st, I encourage everyone that's in the acronym, allies, please join us on October 1st. This is going to be a nationwide protest. It is called the National Day of Action to End Violence and Genocide on Transgender People. This is the time that we are not to be silent anymore. Let's bring back the slogan. We're here, we're queer, and we're not fucking going anywhere. Let's bring that back. Because that's the thing. People have gotten too comfortable. We need to make them uncomfortable. We are not a community to where we're going to be taken advantage of. We are not a community to where you could just use us to attack others. Please humble yourselves. Do not listen to TERFs. Like I've said, debunk what you have to. Just keep spreading the education and awareness around. Because like I said, there are now 27 trans lives that have been lost due to fucking transphobia and ignorance. The hate must fucking end. And if Marjorie Taylor Greene's bill goes through, that'll be the end. If we do not combat this TERF movement, it'll be our demise. That's why we need to be out in the street using our voice more than ever. If you are afraid of engaging in any uncomfortable conversations, know that you'll have support no matter where you go. Like Jess said, tag her. Or if you have some stuff that you want to deal with, tag me. I don't mind. I mean, Tsukuru, you know that very well. I don't mind going after people. I call it out like as I see it. So please, I just want everybody just to stay safe. Please take care of yourself. Mutual aid is necessary at this point. So if a trans person, of course, vet them out, because I know there's people that scam for mutual aid. But if a trans person or anybody in the acronym is dealing with a struggle, do what you can to help. Do what you can. And when it comes, I want to go ahead and make this announcement too. So after the protest, Jess will be dropping some of her own content where we're going to be discussing feminism. So I want everybody to go ahead and check that out when it comes. It'll be released sometime in October. So with that being said, I want to encourage everybody to please like, share, and subscribe. Spread this around. And if anybody is interested in joining this network, please hit either of us up. Because this platform, again, is made for you all to use your voice. Again, I don't care what your political beliefs are, as long as you understand.
As long as you're not a hater.
Yeah, exactly. As long as you're not being a hater, like, we're good.
Yeah.
As long as you're not the one that's engaging in the gatekeeping, we're good. So with that being said, keep a lookout for Up Close and Personal. We got an episode that's dropping on Monday. It was a really good episode. I got a chance to actually interview a couple. It was a queer man and a trans woman. So please take a look at it. It'll humble you. It sure as fuck humbled me. So with that being said, please take care of yourselves, and we will see you next Wednesday.
Can I say just one more thing? Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so non-binary people are non-binary people, okay? Non-binary people are non-binary people, non-binary.
Non-binary people are valid. Non-binary people are valid.
And think about it. If you honor non-binary people, it'll break down this, heteronormative, patriarchal structure. So please honor non-binary people. We are the gateway to freedom and liberation.
So, yes, liberation for all. That's what we want. Liberation for all. That being said, we will see you next Wednesday, and we'll hit you up next time.